Rise for the benediction.
I suppose on a primary election day, it's rather appropriate to mention the term politics. But to mention the term politics in polite society these days likely as not evokes the image of Robert Stack, the Untouchables, and La Cosa Nostra. For it's one of the unfortunate misunderstandings of the current day that politics in any way, shape, or form is inevitably sinister and quite a bit less than desirable. And those who might look aghast at the political maneuverings of secular society deem it unthinkable that the sacred, blessed church should be touched by anything quite so human as the interaction of men with men on behalf of a cause. Yet to hope that society, much more churchly society, should remain free of political maneuverings or even want to remain free is somewhat akin to hoping that babies might somehow be produced without sex, a hope which really isn't very natural, is it? In fact, the desire to uphold some image of the church as a non-political entity reflects our reluctance to accept the congregation of believers as the gathering place of truly human persons. Good old days religion and romantic hymns which dredge up the past, together with glamorized interpretations of the early lives of the apostles, convey the idea that life in the early church was somehow free from the political necessities of the kinds of lives which we live. Indeed, it may be quite expedient for the modern day churchman to insist that the church is free from politics. A district president wrote recently that we are a church, not a political organization, a statement which it seems to me denies the very characteristics of human existence. Politicians, he continues, project themselves. Churchmen do not. The man does not seek the office seeks the man. Consequently, he adds, every requirement from those under consideration to protrude themselves in competition hardly finds room in the church. A point of view which causes one to twist the Shakespearean exclamation a bit to, methinks he doth protest too much. For one of the facts of life is that human beings are by design political. The disciples argued as to whom was to sit at the right hand of the master, and in their effort to deal with their own misgivings about the whole endeavor, they urged Jesus to go up to Jerusalem in order that his power might be manifested, and their understanding of the cause vindicated. And as Pierre Burton points out in his book, The Comfortable Pew, the very death of Jesus was political, for he was crucified for stirring up the people. Christians, therefore, like any other human beings, are political animals. And in the world of which the church is part and parcel, we live and move politically, both for good and for evil. Those who under the guise of devotion deny the political character of the church fail to recognize that the polished cliche or the saccharine smile are as much a part of religious political manipulation as the toothy facade of the professional politician. Indeed, when Sinclair Lewis was damned for writing Elmer Gantry, it was as much for his expose of the unethical politics of the church as for any alleged untruths. Peter Berger points out that while Protestant denominations in this country differ widely in the official definitions of their organizations, one soon discovers that the basic form of organization for any church body is bureaucratic. And since a bureaucracy operates politically, any Christian who wishes to fully understand the denomination of which he is a member must acquaint himself, therefore, with the struggles for power which go on therein. He must work, in other words, for good church politics. Now, this is not to suggest that the Holy Spirit is an inoperative being in the contemporary church, for this is hardly the case. What is suggested, however, is that what we do in the name of the Lord is not in all cases the Lord's work. The Spirit, after all, works where he wills, and not just at every drop of his name. Throughout the history of the church, men have used the name of the Lord to justify all sorts of heinous behavior. The rack, the burning of St. Joan, the slaughter of Jews, the persecution of racial minorities have been condoned by some church officials who have found it expedient to shape the church to quite human ends. It is, it seems to me, a characteristic of bad politics that the will of men is confused for the will of God. Now, good church politics, on the other hand, are not naive, but critical. And the person who works for such politics is not only critical of the organization church, but of his own efforts in that organization as well. Now, this criticism is not a criticism that leaves the church without direction. Rather, it's a criticism which frees the believer to take the calculated risk that what he does may, in some way, be allied with the will of God, or may not. In effect, it's the same kind of risk associated with Luther's admonition to sin boldly. Good church politics, and the term, I think, fits. Good church politics, therefore, involve an openness to the direction of God with an understanding of the weaknesses of men and the frailty of the human endeavor. Indeed, it is ultimately to take seriously the biblical injunction to be wise as serpents and innocent as doves, without confusing the one for the other.